This is part 3 in the 10-part series about how to use xAPI with articulate storyline. This is the most important session to date, and it's going to be the most important one because in this one, everything's going to come together and we're actually going to start sending these custom xAPI statements from articulate storyline. And if in the first couple of sessions you felt a bit, you felt like, oh, this is a lot of code, this is a lot of work. Once you do the work in this session, sending custom xAPI statements is going to be as easy as creating a new trigger in storyline and modifying some files afterwards. That will take like a couple of minutes. But you're not going to have to like write all this code every time you want to send statements. So it's going to get easy. Hi, Melina. Hi, everybody. Thanks for making it. If you didn't have a chance to create your Learning Record Store account and do that stuff, don't worry. We're going to get there in the end. This session is going to be pretty fast paced. So we're going to start this one like we start the others with some JavaScript basics. So just follow along for now. You don't need to write anything, but this is going to be important for what we're going to do once we dive into the xAPI file. And also, you might notice I changed my screen resolution, so hopefully it's a lot easier to see now and it's not so tiny. So I'm just in an empty JavaScript file and I want to show you some things. So last week we were talking about the console.log feature. And when you enter this in the console in an internet browser, let's just look at an example. I'll open up the console here. When we type in console.log hello world, the console, which is what this is called, see, will log hello world. So that's pretty neat. But let's say we don't want to type console.log every time we want to say something. Let's say we want to use a more concise function, okay? And this is what we're going to learn about now, our JavaScript functions. You use a function when you want to reuse code. So let me give you an example. Function print, and then we'll tell the function what to do. Console.log hello world. So now when we call this function, I would just type in print. It will run whatever is between these curly brackets. So we just have this function keyword to say we're about to make a function. We say we name the function, which in this case is print. We're adding some parentheses here because as you're about to see, we can add stuff between these parentheses. And then the contents of the function are just surrounded by these curly brackets. So let me just show you this example in the console. We'll tell the console that we want to define that function. And now when we say print, it says hello world, okay? So that's not a big deal. Here's where it gets cool. So we can add something called a parameter. Okay, I'm just going to type this word in here. A parameter. In this case, it will be message. Okay, so we're telling this function we're going to send it a message when we call it. And then instead of telling this to say hello world, we can just tell it to console.log whatever our message is. So this is called a parameter in JavaScript, and we pass that parameter an argument. So when we do this hello world string right here becomes the argument. So let me just show you how this works. In the console. So see again, we're function print, we're passing this message parameter. So we're telling it we're going to pass it a message, and then we're going to want to console.log that message when we pass it. So now I can say print Devlin, for example. And then it will say Devlin. So with this argument we're passing it just fills out wherever we have that placeholder in the function. So we can do whatever we want. Print hello, hello, hello. The website didn't end it. So there we go. So this is going to be really important because we're going to use a function like this, and we're going to use these parameters to reuse our xAPI statement code when we get into the storyline course. So let me check the chat and see if everyone is following with that. Is everyone good with that concept? And yeah, some of you this might be like really basic. Some of you already know how to code. But I want to make sure we're all up to speed with this because it's only going to get we're going to use it again. Yes? Okay, good. Then let's move along here. So can everyone open up their xAPI statement.javascript file that we created at the end, that we created in the last session? And if you weren't at the last session or you don't have a JavaScript file with this, just let me know. I might be able to copy and paste this into the chat. Try. Oh, it's too long to paste in the chat. So if anyone doesn't have this, let me know. I think probably everyone here has already seen the first two. So get this open. We're going to start adding to it. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so let's get started. So we have our statement object here that we created in the first session. So look at these curly brackets. Go to the first curly bracket that's starting off this object. And we want to give this object a name. So, just like we defined variables here, we're going to make this our statement variable. So we're going to add the const keyword to tell us we're going to have an unchanging statement object. And then just put an equal sign like we did here to define the variables. And just like a variable can hold a string or a function, it can also hold an object. So this statement variable is now equal to this entire object. And that's what we want to do. Okay. If everyone's good with that, what we're going to do next is we're going to turn this code into a function. So go ahead and click on that first line of code and do a couple of line breaks, or even just one line break will be good, so that we have a blank first line here. And just like we did with the console.log function, we're going to use the function keyword. We're going to call this function send statement. We'll add these little parentheses, and then we will open up the bracket. If it automatically ended the closing curly bracket for you, go ahead and scroll to the bottom and add the closing curly bracket. I'm just going to go ahead and start indenting this stuff. It looks good now. So what we did, added function keyword, send statement, add these parentheses, open the curly bracket, and at the very bottom, close the curly bracket. Is everyone good? I mean, we're making good time if everyone's following along here. Because what we did is we turned our code into a function so that every time we call this function, it's going to execute all of the code between these curly brackets. All right. And again, yeah, please don't, please speak up if anything's confusing or if you're getting left behind, because I want to make sure everyone here can actually do this at the end of it. So we're going to move along if everyone's good. So let's keep adding to this. Let's make sure our JavaScript file is in good shape, because once that's done, it's going to be really easy what we have to do next. So right now, we have this statement, but whenever we execute this code, we don't know where the statement's going to get sent, okay? So we need to configure it to work with our specific learning record store. And you do that with something called, with the conf object for maybe confirmation. I'm not sure what it stands for, but we're going to create a new object here. So the constant keyword, conf for conf, equal sign, and then we're creating an object just like we've done in the last sessions with these curly brackets. Once you have that object started, it takes an endpoint property, and this is going to be the URL of our learning record store endpoint. So we'll just put a placeholder here for now. So I'm just going to type in placeholder. And then we're going to have an auth property, which is like our authorization. So start that. This looks kind of weird. It's just like some code that's going to 1 second. User and password. So this is just some code, to base 64 in this basic space in a string. Make sure you have that space. It's going to basically convert this to, it's going to encode this, to my understanding, so that it's not just passing your username and credentials over the open web. And if you're wondering where this stuff is coming from, we're going to import a code file later on, and we're going to make sure that it's also linked to our storyline project. So this kind of stuff is just methods that are included in that code file, so that we don't have to write code from scratch that will actually, you know, what's the word? So that we don't have to write code from scratch that's going to make this like encrypted, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I followed you, but an X came up on line 2 now. Does it matter? An X came up on line 2. I'm not sure why an X would come up right here. So we have that function keyword, send statement, open and close parentheses, and then an open and curly bracket. So just adding that and ending this closing curly bracket down here, I don't think that should make any X's come up. But we might want to take a look at your code. Maybe paste your first 2 lines of code in the chat, and I could take a look at it. But yeah, everyone just hopefully, everyone get up to speed on this conf object too. So this is a placeholder, and this user and pass, these are also placeholders. I'm going to show you how to get that in the next step from our learning record store. If you haven't already, or if you don't have a learning record store, go to lrs.io and create an account really quick right now. You'll have to just put in your info and then confirm an email, and your account will be made. It's completely free. The keyword const is reserved. Yeah. Do you have anything before const? Like, I'm just trying to recreate that issue. I'm not sure about that. What you could try is maybe try changing it to let or var if you're getting that issue. It doesn't, I'm not sure why it would be saying that, but we'll know soon enough if that's going to cause an issue down the line. But for now, maybe just try using the var or the let keyword and see if that X goes away, just in case. I'm not sure what's wrong with that. But if everyone has their lrs.io account, if you're signed in there, you should be seeing this screen with the big green create an LRS option. So I'm going to go ahead and select this. And if you're here too, click that green button. We're going to name the LRS. I'll just name it xAPI Crowdcast Test. And I think this name has to be unique, so don't name it something super simple. Maybe throw your first name in there, something to make it more unique. Just whatever you want. Create a test LRS, pretty much. Don't worry about these boxes. Just press create after you add the name. Once you've created it, you should see it as an option from your home screen when you're signed in. So it'll show your LRSs. Go ahead and select, the one that you just created. I'm going to check the chat, make sure we're all good. Maybe not saved as .js. Yeah, that's a good point. So Nicole, make sure that file save as, and then it's xAPI-statement.js. And the save as type is either JavaScript or all files. Yeah, that extension will be really important, the .js at the end. Good call out, Sam. Thank you. So I'm assuming everyone is good to go with the LRS, because now we're looking at this right here is the endpoint. So once you've created that LRS, right at the top, you'll see a URL. Go ahead and copy that to your clipboard. And if you're using a different learning record store, it'll be slightly different how you access this on all of them, but you want to get to the credentials. So copy that to your clipboard, hop back over to your code file, and where we added this placeholder for endpoint, go ahead and paste in that URL. This is just telling us, where are we going to send the statements? We're going to send them to this URL. I'm going to copy this code in the chat to make sure that everyone has it exactly. Well, maybe don't use my my endpoint. But the space after basic right here is really important, and making sure that this is spelled exactly like this and capitalized like this is also important. Okay, so I'm going to move forward here. So we got the endpoint. Now we need to get the credentials, which are the username and the password, to actually, tell the LRS that we have the right authority to be sending these statements to it. So wherever you see this no access keys box, go ahead and click that. And now press the create new key option. So key name will just be, this can be whatever you want. We'll call it our key. Okay. So these permissions are really, really important. So by default, it has read xAPI permission checked and write xAPI permission checked. When this one is checked, that means that whoever has this has these credentials, it means that they can pull data from the learning record store. Okay. Unless you're taking advantage of that functionality, or if you're locking access to people that you trust enough to, not pull all of your user data and read it, you probably don't want to have this checked. So right now we're just sending statements to the learning record store, which is what the write permission gives. So we're going to leave the write xAPI permission checked, and we're going to uncheck read xAPI permission. Once we get to week 9 and 10, we will be pulling data from the LRS and doing stuff with it. So we'll need this turned on. But for now, keep that turned off. Just turn on write xAPI permission. We're going to move on a bit, and it's asking for, don't worry about these other items. For now, we have a username and a password. So we can just leave it as these default random strings. You can name it whatever you want if you want to, but I'm just going to press save. So now, once you have that key created, we can see our username and our password. Another word for this, if you're in another learning record store, is a secret, or it's the API key for the username and the API secret for the password. So key and secret is another way you'll see that worded. But for now, let's just copy the username. Oh, it's not letting me. Okay, I guess I'll have to type it in myself. So, use your username and password here, just in these placeholders. So the username and password should be separated by a colon. I hope you can all see that. And it should all be enclosed in it should all be one string. So there's only one quotation mark at the end of this and one before it. Let me see if I can zoom in anymore. So this is what our conf object should look like now. So we're all up to speed. There's only one last thing we need to do to tell this, to tell the file where we're sending the LRS, and that's just with a quick line of code. I'm just going to copy it. So that line of code right there. This right here, adl.xAPI wrapper. We're going to add this xAPI wrapper to our output folder once we get there. But what this wrapper does is basically make it much easier to communicate with the learning record store. And an example of that is right here. We're using this change config method of this wrapper, and then we can just pass in our conf object and and the wrapper is going to take care of all the other communication. So all we need to do is put in this endpoint, this username, and this password, and the wrapper handles all the actual communication with the learning record store. So I'm going to paste this in the chat. Yeah, Nicole, let's leave that for now. I think that if it's an older version of JavaScript or something, we'll just use the VAR keyword, but don't worry about it for now. Hopefully you're still following along with everything else that we're doing. And if you need me to quickly recap or something because you were trying to figure that out, just let me know. But we'll deal with it. If you try to send the statement and it gives you issues, then we'll try changing the keywords here. And where we're pasting this code right after we finish defining that conf object. So just do a line break after that curly bracket, and we're adding this code right here. Can you do all of this in a codepen.io? You're going to need to link to this file from your Storyline course once we publish the Storyline course. So I don't know if CodePen lets you access the code within the CodePen from another file that you're going to host on the web. So I'd say you would probably want to have this as a local file that we can include in the output. The xAPI wrapper file is maintained by ADL, and they're the people who commissioned xAPI and SCORM. I think they branched. They're very closely associated with the Department of Defense. Let's see, ADL. ADL. Let me close the console here. So yeah, it's the Advanced Distributed Learning Initiative. But they're the ones who kind of get the ball rolling with these specs. They're kind of like the overseers of it, and they produce a lot of open source stuff for the community to use. So here it is on GitHub. We're gonna download that file later. But yeah, good question. It's not just some developer in their house making this, or maybe it is, but this is what people are using. And I think they have wrappers too for different languages, but we're going to be using the JavaScript wrapper since that's what we're using. Oh, it's okay, Jonathan. Thanks for stopping by. But okay, if we have made it this far, then we have the code we need to tell the learning record store that we're authorized to access it. And this code, since we made this function, will fire every time we call that function. So we're good to go. We have a little bit more we need to add. So there's one more piece of code that we need to, similar to this one, that actually tells the statement to fire. So we're going to add that piece of code right before the closing curly bracket. And I just pasted it. We're basically creating a new variable saying this is the result from this. Again, we're adl.xAPI wrapper, and now we're using their send statement method to actually send our statement. So this is why we made this a variable earlier, because now we're going to include it in this function, and we're saying, here is our whole statement. Now, wrapper, you handle that communication and make sure it gets to the LRS safely. So once again, I'm going to paste this code in the chat. Everyone add that right before the closing curly bracket for the entire function. And I hope this is, clear enough. We're gonna define our statement, and then this final line of code actually sends it. So we'll probably start having some epiphanies in this next step we're about to get to. So I'm excited for this part because this is where it's all going to start coming together. If anyone is trying to follow along and is not at this point, please speak up because we're about to move on. So I'll keep an eye on the chat, but let's talk about what's coming next here. So let's look at our xAPI statement now. This is what we're going to focus on in this next part. Can you please scroll to the first 2 lines? Yes. So we're opening up the function right here, function send statement, and then this is some storyline code. We're basically getting the storyline player, and then we're creating some variables based off of our storyline variables. This is getting the uname variable from storyline. This is getting the uemail variable from storyline, and we're storing them as JavaScript variables, which ties in nicely to where I was just going. When we look at our actor, we're pulling the user's name from the storyline course, and we're pulling the user's email also from the storyline course. But now let's look at the verb, okay? So we're using this completed verb, but we don't want to just track when users are completing something. And we're not going to make a bunch of different statements. We're not going to have a statement here to send when someone completes something or a bunch of different functions, I mean. That wouldn't make any sense. And same thing with the object. In our last one, we used the write xAPI statement tutorial as our object. We're going to have a lot of different objects. Like if someone's taking a storyline course, we're going to know when they're accessing this xAPI resource or when they're hovering over this xAPI marker. So the marker, the resource, the slides, the questions, the answers, these are all going to be different objects with different IDs and different definitions or names. So how are we going to do that? Does anyone have any ideas? And if so, can you drop it in the chat? How are we going to make it so that we're not using this same ID and the same name every single time we use this statement? Every time we use this function, rather. Free xAPI brownie points to whoever has the right answer. Well, I know some of you have the right answer because you've already done the tutorials, so maybe don't give it away too soon. Put them in variables. That's a good guess. It's like a variable, what we're going to do. Think back to the example I showed at the beginning of this session. So it's like another word for variables. It's variables that are specific to functions, and they're used in a very specific way. So yes, variables, but actually, I'm just gonna add a line break here. Parameters. Remember that word, parameters? So we're gonna make it so every time we call this function in these curly brackets, remember before we were using console, this right here, message, and now we can just tell it whatever we want and it will put it throughout the function. So we're gonna do the same type of thing here, but we're gonna use more than one, okay? So we're going to say we want to include the object, right? The verb. So first we'll include the verb, just the plain name of it. Let me make sure I'm doing this the same order as my tutorial. So okay, good. So we want to include the verb. That'll just be the plain English version of it, like how we have here completed. We'll also want to include the verb ID, which it will be this right here. We'll want to include the object, which will be that plain name for the object. And these are separated by commas, just in case anyone can't tell with those. And then we want to include the object ID. Okay. So verb ID, object, and object ID. We have 4 parameters now that we're using with this function. And once we tell the statement, once we tell this function, yeah, you can expect us to give you a verb ID, an object, and an object ID, then we can use these placeholders throughout our function, just like we would use variables. So just watch this. So the verb ID, we can actually get rid of this, and we can just put it here just like a variable, verb ID. For this completed one right here, we can just put verb. Because again, it's going to pull it, and notice once we use it, it changes a slightly different color because it's saying, oh yeah, you're actually using this now in your function. Good job. So now we just need to add the object and the object ID. So I'll get rid of this plain English version of the object and put object, and I'll get rid of this string with the URL and we'll put object ID. So did everyone follow what we just did there? Just like how, up here we're defining variables and using them. Well, instead of doing that, we actually we're going to have to pass in these values whenever we execute this JavaScript, which we'll be doing from storyline depending on, what we actually want the statement to say. And even if you don't fully understand it yet, you will pretty soon. Just make sure you actually have it, just like this. I'll paste this first line of code in the chat just in case anyone wants to double check their commas or something like that. And now we'll look at this again so you can see where we put that verb ID, object, and object ID. Make sure they're all placed in exactly the right places and you didn't accidentally delete a comma. Make sure they're not enclosed in quotes because that will turn it into a string and it won't do anything. It will say our verb is verb. Whenever we use parameters or variables, we have to use them without quotes around them. If we're all good with that, then I think you need to pat yourself on the back because this JavaScript file is done. So once you've set this up, you never have to touch it again, okay? You're gonna have to copy and paste it, but you're not gonna need to touch it again unless you wanna change which LRS it's going to, or like we're gonna do in the next tutorials, we're gonna add on more detail to these statements so we can see how long someone's spending on the slide, what type of activity they're performing, what kind of scores they're getting on the quizzes. xAPI statements have very specific places to hold those things. And if you watch if you were at the first live session, then you know we went really deep into that. But we're going to cover that in the following weeks. So for now, if you just want to have this simple xAPI statement structure, this is all you need. We replace the URI with an object ID. Yes, this is a placeholder for the URI. Whenever we execute this code, we're going to have to pass it in a valid URI. So we're going to look at how to do this next. So if everyone's good with this piece of code, make sure you save it. You know where it's saved. We're going to need to copy and paste it into our storyline project later. We will need the URI, yes. It will be missed until we send it back in. So let's see. So this will help everyone. This will clear things up. So please go back into your storyline file. Man, I feel like this is rough with this. I feel like I have a small screen with this lower resolution, but hopefully everything's much easier to see now. Like I know last week it was like probably minuscule for some of you if you were on a phone or on a smaller screen or something. So open up your storyline file that had the user, where the user could enter their name and email. I'm going to recreate that really quickly. So adding a text box for the name and email. I'm going to add a text entry input. So again, this is just for if people weren't here last week. I'm just trying to do it really quickly. I'm going to change those variable names. The first text entry is going to be you name. The second one is going to be you email. No default values. And then we're just going to add a submit button. So I'm just going to add a square here. Again, this is definitely not the nicest looking storyline file, but this is just to get the idea. So we're going to add a submit button here. So we didn't do this last week, so go ahead and do that now. Add some sort of button or box, something that users can click to submit their name and email and jump to the next slide. Probably a simple task for most of you. If not, just go to Insert, Shape, click a square, draw the square, and then you can just select the square and type on it, and it will turn it into a little button-looking thing. So right-click your slide, hover over New Slide, Basic Layouts, and click Blank. Basically, just create a new slide. There's a few ways to do that. Do it however you know. But create a new slide here. And let's say on this slide, the user has to make a choice. So I'm going to add a few more boxes. So we'll make these ones big boys. Oops. So if you drag and hold down Control, when you let go, it will be a copy. Or it will duplicate it, I mean. So I'm just making 3 more buttons, a choice A, choice B, and choice C. And we're going to use xAPI to see which choice the user is selecting. And then let's also maybe add some, I'm just going to add something else, like another button up here. It's going to be like view cheat sheet, okay? So view cheat sheet. You don't need to go this far. I'm just going to show you how easy this is to track exactly what they're doing. So we're going to add an option to view an optional resource. And now maybe I'm going to create a new layer here called cheat sheet. And I'm just going to add a shape that covers this whole thing. And we're going to say the answer is C. So this is a great cheat sheet. It tells you exactly what the answer is. Whoops. And we'll just add a button here to close it. So if you're not super familiar with Storyline, don't worry. You don't need to do. You don't need to add this next piece. I'm just going to do it to show an example here. But yeah, so on our base layer, we have choice A, choice B, choice C. We have a view cheat sheet option. We'll add a trigger so that when the user selects this view cheat sheet option, it's going to show the cheat sheet layer. So everyone see how I did that? So action, show layer cheat sheet. When the user clicks rectangle 4, I'm going to press OK. I'm going to go back to the cheat sheet, and I'm going to add a trigger here so that it will hide this layer when the user clicks the close cheat sheet button, which for me is rectangle 2. I'm going to preview this really quick to make sure the functionality works. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but we'll just make sure. So here are our choices. We're going to view the cheat sheet. The answer is C. Oh, great. We're going to close the cheat sheet. So our functionality is working. Let's dive back into it. Let's start adding some xAPI tracking now so you can see how this all comes together. So we will start with, just start with choice A, okay? So normally you're going to put some thought up front into your project about what verbs you're using. And again, if you don't remember, we're going to use the registry for that. So it would be the xAPI verb registry, or we'll just go straight to it, registry.tincanapi.com. We would go to our verbs, okay? For our storyline course, let's say we want to know, we're just going to use the selected verb. So we want to send a statement whenever the user clicks one of these so that it says like, you know, Devlin selected choice A on question 1, for example, or Devlin selected choice B. Yeah, we'll just keep it simple like that. Devlin selected choice A, Devlin selected choice B, or Devlin selected choice C. Down the line, we would really want to use the result response part of the xAPI statement to hold what the user actually answered, but we'll get there later. This is just going to demonstrate the point. So we want to find that selected verb on here. No, that's not what we want. So I'm just Control F. I looked for selected. Here we go. Indicates that the actor selects an object from a collection or set to use it in an activity. This doesn't make the most sense. We're not, you know, maybe answered. Indicates that the answer responded to a question. We don't really have a question right here. Let's just pretend we do. Or you know what? I'll add one. What's the answer? There we go. We have a really well-formed question. Beautiful. Okay, so let's pull this verb ID right here. Okay. Can someone paste this in the chat, or I can. Just the URL for this. So that's where we access the verb registry. Here's the answered URI that we're going to use. So don't click on that second link, just copy that. That's where we're going to be pasting as our verb ID. So you're wondering, okay, let's actually do this thing now. So let's do it. So I'm going to create a new trigger right here. The action is going to be to execute JavaScript, okay? So we want to execute some JavaScript when the user clicks choice A. If this is your first time using an execute JavaScript trigger, you're going to click on this little JavaScript option, and it's going to open up the box to put in the actual JavaScript that you want to include. So here's what the trigger looks like. Execute JavaScript when the user clicks rectangle 1. Click on that JavaScript option, and here is where we're going to execute our statement or execute our function. So remember, in our code, we created this send statement function. You know what? Why don't you go ahead and we can copy and paste this into here, and this will make it a lot easier. So go ahead and just copy the send statement, and then in parentheses verb ID, object ID, because that's how we're going to wind up executing this function. We just need to replace these parameters with the arguments, which they're officially called, or the, just the values that we want included in our statement. So our verb, let's go ahead and replace that. We want our verb to be answered, and make sure we include those quotes because this is a string we're passing. Just that before we had this. This is what we want to pass back into the function. So for the verb ID, we're going to copy that thing I put in the chat, that URI associated with the answered verb. It's going to be enclosed in quotes once again. So see, I just got rid of the verb ID placeholder. I pasted in this URI, and I surrounded it by quotes. And now we just have to do the same with our object and object ID. So our object will just be choice A, nice and simple. I'm going to get rid of object, add quotes, call it choice A, and end the quotes. Now your object ID, this is also going to be a URI, so a uniform resource identifier. It's going to look like a URL. It doesn't have to go to a real web page though. That's the only difference. So in the real world, this URL or URI is going to kind of makes sense based off of where the question is. So it will be like devlinpeck.com/xAPI quiz/quiz1/choice A. It will look something like that, But we're just going to keep it simple, okay? We're going to use the example.com domain. So just do http://example.com/choice A. And it doesn't really matter what you put here. The idea is it's supposed to be unique. You want to use your domain, a domain that you or your organization controls when you're setting these. But if you're just testing things, which is what we're doing, we're just giving an example. We'll just use this example.com domain because that's what everyone uses when they're just giving examples related to xAPI. So no one's going to think you own this domain. But I'm going to check the chat. Is everyone seeing what we're doing here? All we're doing is replacing those parameters with the actual values that we want them to hold. Because the send statement function knows what order we're passing them in because, we define them. So all we need to do now is replace them correctly. If we're good to go with this one, we're just going to copy this. So press OK. I'm going to paste this code in the chat. So press OK again, and now we're going to copy this trigger. So using this third button over on the triggers panel with this trigger selected, we can copy it. Go ahead and click the choice B rectangle and then paste it. And now you'll see that this, execute JavaScript trigger for rectangle 2. Click on where it says JavaScript. And now let's just change this from choice A to choice B. And in the actual URI, we'll change that A to a B. And we'll do the same thing for choice C. So I'll just paste this trigger again. I'll click on where it says JavaScript to open up the JavaScript we're executing. And I'll change this to choice C. And in the actual URI, I'll change it to choice C as well. So did everyone follow along with that? That's how easy it is now to change our statements. If we want to, and we'll do it for the cheat sheet too. So I'm going to create a new trigger for the cheat sheet to execute JavaScript. Or you know what? Yeah, I'll just paste that same trigger we were using. I'll move it up in the stack to make sure that it executes the JavaScript before showing that new layer. I'll click on JavaScript to modify what we're saying. Answered. No, we're not answering anything. We're viewing something. So again, I will look at the registry. I'll look for viewed, not experienced, not interviewed, not previewed, not reviewed. Here we go. Indicates that the actor has viewed the object. That's what I want. So I'll copy this. I'll go back over to storyline. And now we're not answering something, we viewed it. And instead of this answered URI, I'll replace it for the viewed URI. We're not viewing choice A, we're viewing the cheat sheet. And we'll go to example.com/cheat sheet. Okay, so now this is going to send a statement when someone clicks this that someone viewed the cheat sheet. So if everyone's following along so far, we're making good time. We have about 15 minutes left. We're going to do the final steps just to connect what we're doing in Storyline to the files that we've been working on, and then we're good to go. It will send the statements to our learning record store. And I'm okay, and I'll run over an hour. Like, I want to make sure everyone gets this right. So if people have questions and stuff, I'm going to stick around. We're going to make sure we get through this. So if anyone does have a hard stop, though, feel free to hop out at 2, but I think we'll go longer. So speak now, please, if you want me to go over anything, or yeah, just let me know in the chat that we're ready to move on. And you can ask conceptual questions too, even if you're following along but you're confused about like how this is working with the whole parameter thing. Let me know about that too. But if we are good to go, what we need to do, let's just jump to the next slide. I'm going to add a trigger here to jump to the next slide when the user clicks this submit button. Jump to the next slide when the user clicks this. That's good. And we should be good to go now. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this. So press the publish option. We're going to publish it for the web because it doesn't need to be a SCORM package. It doesn't need to be an xAPI package. It can be either of those things and this will still work. But we're just going to publish it for the web so we can have an HTML5 package. So name this, I'll just name it xAPI example, and I'll make it go on my desktop so that it's easy for us to find. So you don't need to change any of this. Format HTML5 only, that's fine. Make sure it's publishing the entire project. We should be good. Go ahead and press publish. Once it's published, don't press anything except open. So after publishing your project, don't view it, don't zip it, just open it. And now it has brought us into this folder where this is our course folder. We can click this story.html to open our course. It's just opening it locally here in your browser, but we're not going to do that yet because it's not going to send what we want it to send. So now here is where we need to go ahead and get that xapi.min.js file. We need to get our xAPI wrapper file, basically, is what I'm saying. So here's the official download page for it. I'll post this in the chat. We're going to get some inception going on. Don't worry. And I'm also going to post this direct download link. So just use this second link to the xAPI wrapper.min.js, and it will just download right in your browser. So this is the file we want. I'll show you what I'm going to do with it. So I'll click on it. So once it's downloaded, I'm going to just show it in the folder. And now I'm just going to copy it or cut it. So you can just do Control-X or Control-C, or you can right-click and do copy. Go back to your Storyline output folder that we just made and paste it in here. So we need to make sure we get this xAPI wrapper.min.js file into our Storyline output folder. That's the goal. I can run through it again if someone needs me to, but just download the file and get it in here. And as you can imagine, the other file we need in here is our xAPI-statement.js file. So I have that just right here on my desktop. If you have it somewhere else, go ahead and go ahead and copy it from wherever you have it. So I'm going to do Control-C, or let me make sure it's saved. Actually, that's really important. So make sure you've saved it. Then go ahead and Control-C to copy it, or right-click it, whatever you want to do, and make sure you paste it into your Storyline output folder. So this is how our file should be looking now. So we just need these two JavaScript files. The one we've been working on where we set up our send statement function, and the xAPI wrapper file so that we can do that easy communication with the learning record store. There's only one last thing we need to do now. once we have the files in here, the only thing we need to do is we need to tell the story.html file to access those files. Because right, we can put all the files in the world in here we want, but if they're not being linked to from our main course file, then it's not going to actually pull any of the code from them. And when we execute that send statement function in Storyline, it's not going to do anything because it doesn't know to look in these files. So what we're going to do is open this story.html file with our code editor. So if you have Visual Studio Code, you can just right click and do open with code. But if not, just hover over open with and find your code editor or text editor of choice. Do those two files need to be in the HTML5 folder? Yes, they have to be. Or else, because in Storyline, all we're doing is executing this JavaScript. This isn't going to do anything unless it can pull on all of this code that we created. So if you don't have those in the folder and if you're not linking to them from the Storyline course, then this is just like, might as well be nothing because it's, it has no meaning to the, to the file without that. Yeah, the story.html file. So when you upload a course to an LMS or when you host it online, the story.html file is the one you're going to be linking to. This file is how you actually access the course, and it links to all these other folders and everything to actually show you your course. Storyline publishes its output, and their developers tell it how to do the build process, but this is how you access the course. So once you've opened that story.html file with your code editor, we're going to scroll down to the closing body tag. Now, if you've done these tutorials before, you might have seen me put it up in the heading tag, but I updated those tutorials right before this session. I've been meaning to for a while. You want to link to JavaScript files from right before the end of the body. And the reason for this is because you don't want, JavaScript will load from the top down. So you don't want to put some JavaScript files up here in the header and then force the browser to load those before actually showing anything on the screen, which is what all of this stuff is doing. So again, these files aren't big. It's going to be a very negligible difference, but it's just best practice to link to your JavaScript files right before this closing body tag. So if you want to, you can just scroll to the very bottom, or you can Control F to find this. That's what the closing body tag looks like. This is an HTML tag if this is looking new to everyone. When you do something in HTML, like for example, if you want to do a heading, it would be enclosed in these tags. So when you open it, it's just H1 for heading 1, and when you close it, it's going to be this slash. So we're looking for the tag that's closing the body of the document, because this is basically the last thing being loaded in the course. So right above this closing body tag, we're going to link to our JavaScript files, and I'm just going to copy and paste some code to easily show you how to do that. Because that's what I usually do. You can write it out from scratch, but it's really easy to just copy and paste it from project to project. So let me show you. Here we go. This is what we need. So it's a script tag. We're telling it what type of script it is. It's a JavaScript file, and we're giving it the source, which are the names of our files. So let me paste this one in the chat. Where are we putting that? Oh, we're not we're just finding this in the story.html file. So if anyone missed that, we're right-clicking the story.html file in our output that we got from Storyline, and we're opening it with our code editor. Once we have it open, you're scrolling down and looking for this closing body tag, and right above it, we're adding these two scripts. And this should be the name of the xAPI wrapper file that you included in your folder, and this needs to be the name of the xAPI statement file that we created over the last few sessions. So if you named yours just like xapi.js or something, you need to make sure that you change this to match the name of your file. Okay. So once this is done, go ahead and press Control S to save this, or file save. And now the story file, our main file, knows where to look for that code. So is there a story.html file in the xAPI output? Yeah, we'll just go double check that. So we'll publish. No one has to follow along with this. We're just testing something. So we're publishing for Tin Can API. There's actually a better way to do this if you're already publishing as a Tin Can package. But yeah, you see right here, this is the tin can output. Here's the story.html file. And when you click it, just like with the other one, it opens up this file. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to go back into the file we've been working on. And now let's open this story.html file. You can just double click it and it will open it in your browser of choice. I'm going to say that my name is Devlin. My email is devlinpeck@gmail.com. And let's submit it. And now let's see if I'm getting tracked. So let's say I want to view the cheat sheet. Okay, I know the answer is C, but do we know what I did? So once you've done some actions that you've tracked in here, like once you've clicked one of the options, go back to your learning record store, go to xAPI data, and go to statements. And look at that. You can't see it very well because my resolution is so bad. Oh, here we go. Devlin viewed cheat sheet. Okay, let's try clicking some options now. Let's say I answered choice A. So I viewed the cheat sheet. I'm not very smart, so I just pressed choice A. Maybe I thought the cheat sheet was trying to trick me. So I'll just refresh this. Devlin, oh, because I viewed the cheat sheet a few more times. But yeah, Devlin answered choice A. So if you click this little arrow next to it, you can see the full xAPI statement. This is what you wrote. This is your statement. And you can see that those placeholders automatically populated in the statement. So there's that answered ID, there's that answered. Here's our example.com/choice A. And then the learning record store adds this stuff on, like the statement ID, the timestamp, when it was stored. Don't worry about that. And that's all there is to it, folks. I mean, all you need to add now whenever you want to send new statements is you just need to edit this little bit of code right here to change out the verb ID, the object, and the object ID, and you're good to go. Again, these are really limited statements, and this isn't the best way to send an xAPI statement for a question like this. It's actually a horrible way to do it because the object you would want to be your question, and then you would hold the answer in a different part of the xAPI statement. But we're not going to get there for a few weeks. I just thought this would be a really easy example to see what someone's clicking. Let's do choice C now. And I'm assuming some of us might have had some issues, but again, it answered choice C.